Okay, this is version 4.5 release. So this is a pretty big one with some good features. So I'll get stuck right in. Starting with the beta features, there were two previous beta features moved out of beta. So the advanced search and date time management. So they're working consistently now, so they've been moved into the CRM full time. And it's just a note here, again explaining the process of the beta features and how they flow through the releases and then get implemented. So just might be important to read through that to understand how they work, because some of them might introduce breaking changes depending on how you're using them. So might be necessary to check your sites based on those features that are coming out. And now we have a new Liquid Engine and Nice 2.0. So there's kind of two features rolled into the one here. So the first one, Nice version 2.0, just brings the ability to use advanced styling like bold, italic, choose colors and that sort of thing within the Nice editor. So if I just go to maybe a blog post, a good example. And I'll just go into Nice mode for this blog post. So you can see if I select the title, we've got access to edit that. If I select the text, you can see there's no additional styling options. But if I come down to the body content and select, we can see that there's now additional styling options. And likewise for just static text within the page, we have that option as well. So just a note here that it's available for any static text and any module fields that use the multi-line field or the WYSIWYG field. So that's why didn't have those options for like the name or other fields that wouldn't support that HTML styling within that field. So just keep that in mind. And there's just another note here that it does require valid HTML for Nice 2.0 to work. Then secondly is the new Liquid Engine. Now, there isn't actually any specific notes here on what that actually is, but there are some important points that you may need to look out for, which I'll go into in a minute. But in some tests I was doing to try and find out what the new Liquid Engine did, more so, I found some pretty significant speed improvements, particularly for like nested or recursive module lookups. So, for example, this is the documentation site, and the Ultimate Migration Guide page is by far the biggest or most complex page on the site. And if we look at my little telemetry app here, you can see the page speed I got. This was almost 23 seconds to load this page. And the majority of that was happening at the server level, around 18 seconds the TCP request, which is pretty bad. But it's mainly because of this menu at the side here, where there's modules looking up modules to generate that nested module structure. But on a duplicated documentation site, with the same page with the new Liquid Engine turned on, the page rendered in around 4 seconds. And again, still the majority happening at the server level, but only around 2.5 seconds. So massive improvement. and the other pages were loading considerably faster as well. So that's really exciting to see that come. Hopefully that brings speed improvements to everything else as well. But definitely the documentation site will be getting a speed boost shortly. So coming to the extra notes about things to look out for when activating this, and probably when it comes on full time as well, is that some of the Liquid syntax and the way it renders and scopes the Liquid is different. So it's saying here that you may need to check your custom Liquid and JavaScript implementations. So in particular, if you're using it to render JSON for any JavaScript purposes, then it will now convert or outputs everything in camel case. So all your property names will be camel case, so your JavaScript has to match that. And also if you're using the parameters, or the custom parameters value, if you're passing custom parameters into the component or the module, you have to now reference it as this.parameters, and also check for the camel case. Actually, I think with Liquid the camel case can be both, I believe, but just the change of scope that we now need the this object in front of it. So you can see some things related to that breaking here with this little meter that I had here is broken. If we look at the current site, that's working, but on the duplicate when I activated the new Liquid engine, this broke. So just have to go in and fix some things up like that just with the syntax. So yeah, we'll need to check your sites pretty well. Okay, so then the other beta feature is a massive one. There's quite a few items here, but it's to do with the multi-level categories. So we now have, in the beta feature, we have multi-level categories, and we also have a new property in the Liquid output for categories, and that's the item category ID list. So previously we just had item categories, which would give us a comma-separated list of the category names. Now we get the exact same thing, but with the category IDs as well, so we can output IDs or names. And then we have a conversion of the categories into the nested category structure. So particularly if you use the migration app or you did manual migrations where you had to flatten nested categories from VC into Treepl, the system's now going to look for those. If it's using the right syntax, it'll look for those and convert them to the new nested structure automatically. And it does that by looking for the /. So if you flattened your categories from VC with a /, then apparently when you run the site again, it should automatically convert those to the nested format. We have a new interface when creating categories and subcategories. So of course now we need to be able to manage that, and this is done really well. Couldn't find any fault in it. So sorry, if we go to settings, categories, so same location as before, but now we have a different interface here where we can drag them around. We can drop them in on top of one another to create subcategories. We can expand categories open to see the subcategories and edit the names. And then there's a little context menu here, so we can create subcategories via the context menu as well. And just a note, if you do edit the name, you have to actually click the save icon after editing it. You can't just click out of it. It doesn't save automatically. So that's a nice little neat interface. So yeah, this all just goes through the instructions on using that. Then we have the ability to create, edit categories using the new interface when within a module item. So let's say we're in a blog. And we come down to the categories. So we can see here categories, and we want to create a new category within here. We get the exact same interface come on the side here, so we can do all the same controls right within the item as well. And we also now have a parent, like a default parent category setting. So this is pretty cool, I think. So let's say in our custom module, I'm going to go to this portfolio one. In our settings, under properties, in the default properties, when you enable categories, we now have a parent category selector. So we can actually choose which parent category we want to use for this module. So when we're creating the module items, we can only select categories from that parent category. So I think that's really helpful because categories are global. You may be creating categories for some things that don't relate to other things. So, for example, this portfolio module, you might only have one group of categories that's really relevant for this particular module. So you don't want the client or whoever the user is selecting or even seeing other categories that just don't make sense for that module. So that's really cool. We have change import export format for categories. So when you're importing exporting categories, before it will just list each category name out in a comma separated list, but now it shows more of the subcategory structure. So we have like a / category name, and then when there's a subcategory, it'll have the parent category with a / and the subcategory name, just to define that nesting a bit better. A change to the logic for category filtration. So when you might want to output a list of items. Let's go into an item here. So let's just say we're using the component manager to output a list of custom modules, custom module items. Just leave it on that. And we want to filter them by category. So we choose item category, and it's basically just saying that while you still select the name of the category, behind the scenes, the system's actually going to use the ID of that category. So nothing you really need to do with this one. It's just saying that the system's going to convert this category name into an ID in the background and filter the module that way. So it doesn't really make any difference from our point of view, I don't think. Addition of new component tag of type categories. So this is really cool, I think. So before, you couldn't actually list out all the categories that were in the system. You couldn't just list them out on a page and do something with them. So let's say you have categories in a blog, and you want to list out all the categories in a side panel. The only way to do that was to actually loop through every single blog post, pull out the categories that are assigned to it, collect them all up from all the posts, get rid of the duplicates, and then list out the resulting list, which is pretty cumbersome, and it actually only produced a list of categories that were in use, not all categories within the system. But now we actually have a component tag. So just like listing out any other module, we can list out the categories. And we have three additional parameters to use with that component. So we have parent category. So adding an ID for this parent category value will only output categories from that parent category onwards. So you're basically restricting what categories you output. And then there's a levels deep, so just a number of how many levels you actually want to output from either the parent category or just from the root level category. So both of those properties are optional. It goes into detail here about the defaults and how they use them in more detail. And then of course we have a collection variable. So you can pass the whole liquid object to a variable and output it any way you want. So there's an example of that here. So that's what the code might look like. And the slight difference with this component is that we don't have layouts for it like you would with other modules. So there's like a built-in virtual layout that the system uses, which is actually an option element, which is because the intended or main use for this component tag is within a form, for either a search form, if you've got a custom module search form, or a user submitted custom module where the user has to actually choose from a category. So that's what this module is intended for. So it outputs an option, which I can show an example for. So I've got a test page. Okay, so you can see here there's a little drop down. So that's listing out two levels deep from a particular parent category. And then the liquid output, an example of that is shown here. It's probably better formatted than the one in here, but it basically just shows the structure of the liquid that you can get if you output that to a variable. Okay, and lastly here, just the component toolbox shows the category tree. So just when you're using the toolbox to select the item category, like when you're doing filter by and you need to select the category, it just shows the hierarchy there of the categories as well with the dashes. So yeah, really well thought out and thorough implementation of the nested module, nested categories. I think that's done a really good job there. Okay, so starting with the first backlog item is new email accounts. So yeah, the ability to edit, edit and add to your email accounts within the partner portal. So there's a little screenshot there. You can look at the design of that, but that should be in your partner portal now. And basically just explaining the whole workflow there, but you can basically create everything, including a domain alias. If you have multiple domains, you can create. You can add that domain to the email account, so you've got emails under that domain as well. And email aliases as well, so you can create email aliases. It shows the storage, and you can delete the accounts, reset passwords, and all that. So that's done really well. Next backlog item is contacts import export flow. So now we have the ability to import and export contacts with all these fields available, and with the secure zones, there's two fields, and what happens is, I might just open up this screenshot. Okay. So with the import, so the import file, if you have multiple secure zones that you're assigning someone to, we're actually creating additional rows underneath the contact record. Yeah, just take note of that. And yeah, so just saying that if say the date isn't present, it will just default to the default date. And also any other values in these rows will be ignored. So you can't add multiple countries or anything like that. It'll only work for the secure zone and expiry date. Right, so admin roles for import contacts. So now we can, because we can import contacts, that option or restriction is also available in the roles. So if we go settings, admin user roles. No, it's not in here. So under contacts, we now have can import contacts, so you can allow admins to import contacts or not. And I believe, just a note here, existing configurations of a role, if you have roles implemented for any admin users, this import contacts option will be off by default. So it hasn't applied itself automatically. So if you want that, you have to go in and turn that on for those users. Multiple workflows enabled on the business plan. So now on the business plan, we can have multiple workflows, but not multiple workflow emails assigned to them. So you still only have the one workflow email content, but you can have multiple workflow notifications. So opens that up a little bit. But a bit of a tip there, even though you have one workflow email, you can use Liquid within that to change the content based on based on the form data that was submitted. So that can be a bit of a workaround. So e-commerce menu items. So we now have an e-commerce menu with a bunch of disabled items. So not so much a feature, but maybe a hint of what's to come shortly. So that's pretty exciting. Data source property default empty option. So this is a handy one. So if you have a custom module with a data source, I think this one does. Yep, so this field here is a data source, and I can, if I select the data source there, previously there was no way to actually deselect and just put it back to null or blank. So now we have the please select option there as default, so we can basically unassign a data source. Reindex module button. So now we have the ability to re-index an individual module only, rather than the entire site. So if you go to the settings of a module, so let's say portfolio again, we go into settings, we can see there's a little re-index module icon there. So it will just re-index that module. And even for modules that you don't have access to the settings as such, you can still, like say blogs, even just in the layouts. If you go to any of those setting or layout pages, you'll have access to the reindex module icon. And there's just a note here. Where is it? It may help with any search-related issues. If you're getting some issues with the search not finding items, you can use this to sort of kick that into gear for a particular module. Okay, so now we're into the bug fixes. There's a few good bug fixes here as well. Force disabling from search engine for all trial sites. So basically, if it's a trial site, the system's going to add the no index, no follow meta tag just automatically for it. And then when the site goes live, it won't input that anymore. So, and that's regardless of what setting you have for the disabled from search engines. So either way, if it's a trial site, it's going to have no index, no follow added. SEO priority default. So there was an issue where if you set the default, let's say custom module, properties, I think it is. Yeah, if you set a default priority for your sitemap, 0.5, and you say that within, when you were creating or viewing an item within that module, it would show the default priority there, but it wasn't actually applied. It was just a visual thing until you actually saved that SEO tab. But now it will actually apply it to the item correctly. And there was a bug with this.member object wasn't rendering on the system invoice email. So that's now fixed. Custom modules, the content template changed upon front-end update. So apparently if you're adding or updating a custom module item from the front end, like a user-submitted item, in certain cases it would change the template that was assigned to that item, different to what the default was. So that's fixed. We have advanced search, doesn't search in blogs. So again, related to that re-indexing process, any modules that were in a nested or like a group, folder group structure, there was an issue there with the search. So that's apparently fixed. And there were some spaces generated in the form code for when you had the event or payment fields in the form. There were just a lot of spaces being generated there. So hopefully that's all tidied up. And lastly, update item from front end would clear info when updated. So basically, if you're doing a user submitted item and there were fields that you didn't include in the form, that you didn't want to be edited or updated or anything like that, upon submission, those missing fields would actually wipe the data from the item. So that's being fixed now too, which is good. Okay, so that was a big one and some good updates there. But yeah, just another note, just to really check these beta feature items, particularly these new ones that are coming, because they're quite big changes and could actually affect things on your site. I think I did see somewhere too that if you are having issues, I think it's in here somewhere, noted here somewhere, but if you turn on a beta feature and there are issues breaking with your site, you can contact support so that they can fix it, so that it gets fixed before they actually roll it out. And I think they'll fix that for you as well along the way. So yeah, make sure you check. And one final note, just a reminder to vote on backlog items, especially when there's lots of things being released. Some of the items that you previously voted on might have gone through, so you might have some votes available or whatever. So just double check that you haven't got any votes left that you need to put against an item. Okay, so thanks for listening.